The morning of my mother's retirement party, I woke up at 5:30 without an alarm. That's how I knew something was wrong, even before anything happened. I never wake up early. I'm the person who sets 4 alarms and ignores 3 of them. But that Saturday, I opened my eyes in the dark and just lay there, staring at the ceiling of the hotel room, listening to my husband breathe beside me, feeling this low hum of dread I couldn't name. I told myself it was nerves. My mother had spent 31 years as a school nurse at the same elementary school in Denton, Texas. 31 years of putting bandages on scraped knees, calling parents about fevers, sitting with kids who were scared and didn't know why. She was quiet about it the way she was quiet about everything. She didn't complain, didn't expect recognition, just showed up every single day for 31 years. And now she was retiring, and my husband's family had offered to host the dinner at their lake house, and I had cried in the car on the way there because I was so happy for her. That was 3 weeks ago when they offered. When everything still felt fine, I should have paid more attention to the way my mother-in-law said it. We'd love to host something for her. Not a party. Something. That word was doing a lot of work, and I chose not to hear it. My husband, I'll call him Nathan because that's his name and I'm done protecting it, grew up in a different world than I did. His family had a lake house, and a house in Dallas, and a condo in Scottsdale they used twice a year and complained about maintaining the rest of the time. They were the kind of people who said things like, "We really should simplify," while standing in a 4,000 square foot kitchen. His mother, Patricia, had never worked a day in her adult life and considered that a point of pride. She once told me at Easter that women who have to work have her deepest sympathy. I have to work. I'm a physical therapist. I've been working since I was 16. Nathan always said his mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. He'd been saying that for 4 years. We had been married for 2 of those 4 years. The first 2, we dated. I spent a long time during those 2 years convincing myself that the things Patricia said were just awkward, just generational, just her way of showing she cared. I was very good at convincing myself. The lake house was about 90 minutes outside Dallas. My parents drove up from Denton. My mom wore her good blue dress, the one she saves for occasions, and my dad wore a tie he'd ironed himself and was very proud of. They pulled into the circular driveway looking a little wide-eyed at the size of the place, and my mom laughed quietly and said, "Well, this is something." And I squeezed her hand and felt so proud because my mother deserved to be celebrated somewhere beautiful, and I had made that happen. Patricia greeted us at the door in white linen. She air-kissed my mother's cheek and said, "You must be so relieved. All those years around other people's children. I can't imagine." My mother smiled and said thank you, and I kept my face very still. Inside, the main room had been set up with round tables. Patricia's interior decorator had apparently popped by that morning. I found this out later and rearranged the seating. There were 8 tables. The head table, long and centered by the window overlooking a lake, was set with the good china, crystal glasses, fresh orchids. My parents were at table 6. I found out when my dad came to find me, quietly, while I was in the kitchen helping with something. He touched my elbow and said, "Sweetheart, where are we sitting?" He had his reading glasses on and was holding the little place card with his name on it, turning it over in his hands like he was hoping the table number would change if he looked long enough. I took the card from him and read it, table 6, in the back corner, near the hallway to the bathroom. I walked out to the main room and looked at the head table. Patricia and her sister. Patricia's sister's husband. Nathan's aunt and uncle who flew in from Charlotte. Nathan's college roommate and his wife, who I had met exactly once. 2 family friends whose names I didn't know, and Nathan. Sitting at the head table at the party for my mother, without saving a seat for either of my parents. I found him on the back porch, on his phone. "Why are my parents at table 6? He looked up. The seating was Mom's thing. She organized it. "Nathan, this is my mother's retirement party. My parents should be at the main table." He did the thing he does where he exhales slowly through his nose and looks slightly to the left of my face. "Let's not make it a thing. There are seats everywhere. It doesn't matter where anyone, it matters to my mother. She won't even notice." He went back inside before I could respond. I stood on the porch for a moment looking at the lake, which was flat and silver, and completely indifferent to what was happening in my life. Then I went to find Patricia. She was in the dining room, adjusting the orchids on the head table, and she turned when she heard me come in with the kind of smile that had always made me feel like I was being evaluated. "Your parents must be so excited," she said. "This is a lovely turnout." "My parents are at table 6, I said. She set down the orchid stem. "Yes, I know. I thought they'd be more comfortable back there. They don't know many of the guests, so it seemed, Patricia." I kept my voice even. "This dinner is for my mother. She should be at the main table." "Well, the main table is really for close family, and she's my mother." There was a pause. Patricia looked at me with that patient, faintly pained expression she used when she felt I was being difficult. "Of course she is. I just meant in terms of how everyone knows each other. It's not a hierarchy, it's just logistics." Then she turned and started talking to her sister, who had appeared from nowhere, and the conversation was over. I stood there for a moment. I thought about what Nathan had said. She won't even notice. I thought about the way my dad had turned that place card over in his hands. I thought about 31 years of a woman showing up quietly, without recognition, just giving and giving and giving and asking for nothing back. And I thought about how this dinner, this one dinner, was supposed to be for her. Then I went to find my sister-in-law, Jess. Jess is the only one in Nathan's family I have ever genuinely liked. She's 3 years younger than Nathan, and she has always been honest with me in a way the rest of them aren't. She was standing by the bar with a glass of wine, and when she saw my face, she said, "Oh no, what happened?" I told her. She closed her eyes for a second. "Table 6 is by the bathroom hallway." "I know. My mom did that on purpose." "I know, Jess." She looked at her wine. "What are you going to do?" I hadn't known the answer until she asked, but when she asked it, it was suddenly very clear. "I'm going to fix the seating," I said. "Right now. She's going to be furious." "Yes," I said, "she is." I went back to the main table. Patricia was still talking to her sister across the room. Nathan was somewhere else. I didn't look for him. I picked up the place cards of the 2 family friends I'd never met, David and Susan something, and I carried them to table 6. Then I went to table 6 and picked up my parents' cards and carried them to the main table and set them down in the 2 newly empty seats, right next to the orchids, right next to the window. It took approximately 45 seconds. Then I went to get my parents. My mom was sitting at table 6 with her hands folded in her lap, talking to my dad in that quiet way they talk to each other, like they have their own frequency nobody else can tune into. She looked up when I came over and smiled, and there was something in that smile, something small and careful, that told me she had already understood exactly what the table number meant and had already decided not to say anything about it. That's who my mother is. She notices everything and says nothing. "Come with me," I said. "Your seats got switched." My dad raised an eyebrow. My mom looked at me for a moment, and I held her gaze, and then she stood up and smoothed her blue dress and said, "All right, sweetheart," like I'd just told her dinner was ready. I walked them to the main table. I pulled out my mother's chair. I watched her sit down in front of the orchids and the crystal and the window full of silver lake, and something in my chest cracked open in the best possible way. That lasted about 4 minutes. Patricia appeared at my elbow. "What is this?" Her voice was low and controlled, which was somehow worse than if she'd raised it. "I moved my parents to the main table," I said. "You moved my guests. David and Susan are at table 6. They'll be perfectly comfortable. You had no right to Patricia." I turned to face her fully. "This dinner is for my mother. My mother is sitting at the main table. That's how it's going to be." She stared at me. I had never in 4 years spoken to her like that. I had always softened things, qualified things, given her off-ramps. I watched her process the fact that I wasn't doing that now. "Nathan is going to hear about this," she said. "I'm sure he will," I said. She walked away. I sat down next to my mother. My mother touched my hand under the table and didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Nathan found me 20 minutes later, while people were getting settled and the caterers were starting to move. He came up behind me and spoke quietly near my ear, which he does when he doesn't want to look like we're fighting. My mother is upset. I know. You move guests around without asking anyone. I moved my parents to the appropriate seats at a party for my mother. It wasn't your call to make. I turned and looked at him. We were standing near the edge of the room, and nobody was paying attention to us, and I looked at my husband's face, the slight tension in his jaw, the way he was looking at me like I was a problem to manage, and I felt something shift. Not break, not shatter dramatically, just shift, quietly, like a door moving on its hinges. Nathan, I said, your mother put my parents at the table by the bathroom, at a party for my mother. And you sat down at the main table without saving them a seat. And when I told you, you said she won't even notice. He opened his mouth. Don't, I said. I need you to actually hear that, not defend it, not explain it, just hear it. He closed his mouth. This is my mother's night, I said. I need you to decide right now whose side you're on. That's not fair. This isn't about sides. Okay, then go sit with my parents. He didn't move. I waited 5 seconds, then I walked away. Dinner was served. My mother sat at the head table and ate herb-crusted salmon off the good china. My dad made a joke about the crystal glasses being too fancy to drink out of, and made the whole table laugh. Patricia sat at the far end and did not look in our direction. Nathan sat at the main table too, eventually. He didn't speak much. At some point during the main course, Patricia's sister, a woman named Gail, who I had always thought was the more honest version of Patricia, leaned over and said to my mother, I hear you were a school nurse for over 30 years. That must take incredible patience. And my mother said, it does, but when you love the work, it doesn't feel like patience, it just feels like showing up. Gail looked at her for a moment and said, that's a remarkable thing. I had to look at my water glass. After dinner, there were toasts. Nathan's father, Gerald, said a few words that were pleasant and general. A friend of the family said something forgettable. And then I stood up. I hadn't planned to speak. But I was standing before I decided to stand, and everyone was looking at me, and so I spoke. I said that my mother had spent 31 years taking care of other people's children. I said that she had done it without complaint, without expectation, without needing anyone to notice. I said that growing up I watched her come home tired and still make dinner. I watched her go to work sick when other people would have called in. I watched her comfort children who were scared and parents who were panicked and do it all with the kind of steadiness that doesn't come from training. It comes from character. I said that character doesn't require a lake house or crystal glasses or orchids to be worth honoring, but it does require showing up in the right seat. I didn't look at Patricia when I said it. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were bright and she was pressing her lips together the way she does when she's trying not to cry. And my dad had his hand over hers. There was a long moment, and then people clapped. Gail clapped the loudest. Patricia did not clap. We left around 9. My parents hugged me in the driveway, and my mother held on a little longer than usual and said, "Thank you, sweetheart, for everything." She knew. She always knows. In the car on the way back to Dallas, Nathan and I didn't speak for a long time. The highway was dark and the radio was off, and I watched the lights of other cars moving past in the opposite direction. He spoke first. That toast. Yes. My mother thought it was pointed. It was. Another long silence. She's not going to forget this, he said. I know, I said. Neither am I. I want to be honest about what happened after, because this isn't a story where everything gets resolved cleanly in a single night. Life isn't structured that way, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Nathan and I went home and we were polite and quiet and went to bed without resolving anything. Patricia sent me a text the next morning that said she was disappointed by my behavior and hoped we could speak when emotions weren't running so high. I read it twice and then set my phone face down on the counter. 3 days later, Nathan came home from work and sat across from me at the kitchen table and said he'd been thinking. I waited. He said he'd been thinking about what I said in the car. About showing up. He said he'd been thinking about his mother's text, which he had also seen. He said he'd been thinking about the way his mother speaks to me and the way he responds to it, or doesn't respond to it, or explains it away. He said he'd been thinking about his father, who has never once, in 30 years of marriage, told Patricia she went too far. He said he didn't want to be his father. I looked at him across the table, and I thought about 4 years of small moments I had let go. Small concessions, small silences, small surrenders. The accumulated weight of deciding that keeping the peace was the same as maintaining peace. It isn't. I know that now. I told him that what happened at the party wasn't the real problem. The real problem was a pattern. I needed him to see the pattern, not just apologize for Saturday. He said he saw it. I didn't say, "Great, I believe you, we're fine." I said I needed to see it too, over time, in the way he responded to his mother. Not in a conversation at our kitchen table, but in the actual moments when it was easier to stay quiet. He said that was fair. We are working on it. I don't know what that means in a year or 5 years, and I'm trying to make peace with not knowing. What I do know is this: I am not the woman who sits in the back corner table anymore. Not at my mother's party, not anywhere. My mother texted me the week after, a photo of herself in her garden, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel and her old sun hat on, squinting into the camera like she'd asked someone to take the picture and immediately regretted it. The caption said, "First Monday without an alarm clock in 31 years. I think I'll survive." I laughed at my phone in my car in a parking lot for probably too long. She earned that garden. She earned that sun hat and that Monday morning and every slow, quiet, alarm-free day that comes after it. And she earned the seat at the table by the window, with the orchids and the silver lake behind her, even if someone else had to make sure she got it. I'm glad I was the one who did. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually costs to stay quiet. Not the dramatic kind of silence, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The other kind, the practiced kind. The kind I had spent 4 years perfecting, where you translate someone else's cruelty into something more comfortable, where you tell yourself she didn't mean it that way so many times that you start to believe it, even when you know you don't. The night of my mother's retirement party, I stopped doing that. And I want to be honest about what it took to get there, because it wasn't courage. Not exactly. It was more like a threshold. You can only watch someone you love be made small so many times before something in you simply refuses to look away. My mother never asked for anyone to fight for her. That's the thing about people with real character. They don't demand to be recognized. They just keep showing up, keep giving, keep doing the work, and they trust that it means something even when nobody says so. She trusted that for 31 years. She was right to. But on that particular Saturday, at a lake house with orchids on the head table, someone needed to say it out loud. Someone needed to pull her chair to the right seat and stand in front of a room full of people and name what her life had actually been worth. I was the only one there who was going to do it. What I've learned from that night, from all of it, the party and the car ride home and the kitchen table conversation 3 days later, is that how you treat people reveals what you actually believe about them. Patricia moved my mother to the corner table because she had decided, somewhere underneath all the linen and the orchids and the good china, that my mother's 31 years of quiet service were worth less than the comfort of people she already knew. That's a choice. It looks like logistics. It is not logistics. And Nathan staying quiet. That was a choice too. We don't always recognize our silences as decisions, but they are. Every time he exhaled through his nose and looked slightly past my face and said, "Let's not make it a thing," he was choosing. I spent a long time not naming that. Once I named it, I couldn't unname it. There's something I've started to believe, not from anything anyone told me, just from watching how things actually unfold over time. The way you treat the people who can't do anything for you is exactly who you are. My mother couldn't give Patricia anything. She wasn't wealthy, wasn't connected, wasn't useful to the world Patricia had built. And so Patricia had no patience for her. That's a simple equation. It's also a devastating one, because it means Patricia has spent her life surrounded only by people she could use. which is a very lonely way to live even if you never admit it. My mother, on the other hand, has spent 31 years giving to children who couldn't give her anything back. Kids who were scared and needed someone steady. And she gave it anyway every day, because that's who she is. I know which woman I want to be. That's what I carried home from that party. Not anger, not triumph. Just clarity about who deserves the seat at the front of the room, about what it means to show up for someone when it's inconvenient, when it costs you something, when no one is going to applaud you for it. My mother was right. When you love the work, when you love the person, it doesn't feel like patience. It just feels like showing up. I'm still learning how to do that, but I know now, at least, that I'm capable of it.